Okay, welcome everybody. This is Lacy Frazer here with Whole Soul School and Foundation for my December 2019 Transformation Talks podcast. So for those who have been watching in the past, what I've done each month is I've interviewed a formerly incarcerated man who most likely has been through my Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life program in prison. And those have been wonderful interviews. And I feel so blessed to be able to be reconnected with them and to be interviewing them. And I feel even more blessed today to be interviewing my friend and colleague, Traci Phillips. And Traci is an executive leadership coach. And Traci joined me in the prison once a month for a couple of years, working with these men in the group. And so I thought it would be sort of a special treat today to have Traci join me for my December transformation talks to continue the conversation and add to the conversation about personal transformation, and especially the personal transformation that she and I witnessed while working in the prison with the men in the prison, because there's so much to be learned from that experience. So I want to just remind listeners that the mission of Whole Soul School and Foundation is to educate, enrich, integrate, and liberate the heart and soul of people worldwide. We also support projects and products that are specifically designed to educate, empower, and inspire people whose lives have been impacted by incarceration. So I first want to welcome Traci today. Hi, Traci.
Hello. How are you, Lacy?
Wonderful, and I'm so appreciative that you're hanging out with me on this beautiful Saturday afternoon, morning really. And I sort of entitled this talk, "The Ingredients for Transformation." You know, we do a lot of talking about personal transformation at Whole Soul School and Foundation, and it can be for some people, I don't know if I'd say an enigma, but it's a process that has been defined by so many people over the ages, and in different ways and from different angles. And I know that you and I had a very unique experience together as we worked with men in prison and in a group format over a couple years. And there were certain things in that process and in that experience that I think really contributed to the environment that we were in, that helped these men step up and embrace change at a very, very deep core level. So that's what I want to talk with you about today. And maybe first you could introduce yourself, tell us a little bit more about you, and then we could sort of dive into the topic.
Yes, sure. So it's actually quite an honor to talk about this today, and in light of what I do for a living, to start with, because I really am. I mean, I know that this is absolutely true. I really am in the arena of executive coaching, and specifically around leadership because of my experience with you and the men at Butner. I was at the time, I was a lifestyle coach. You know, I had started out in holistic health and then taken on the lifestyle piece because it really is more my forte. It's really more my interest. It's my natural skill sets lend themselves to that. And so I was doing that, and, you know, coming in and working with the men really allowed me to see, you know, because many of these men had been in leadership roles before they were incarcerated. And so how some of these different aspects of the roles they had been in and the environments that they had been in um, lend, kind of led them to perceive that they needed to behave or make certain decisions. And so you look at, you know, high pressure environments and how they can lead us to do things we might not otherwise do. And so it made me really realize, wow, this is an area that could use some consciousness. You know, I've always been a consciousness driven person. And I had told you actually when we were talking before how, you know, it was just a couple of months prior to being asked to join you at Butner that I'd had this kind of divine download that, you know, this book, you know, The Conscious CEO, and what would that be about? And, you know, thinking about men specifically in leadership roles, because so many of the top industries, you know, are still led by men. That's changing. But what would it be like for these types of individuals, these leaders, to have transformational experiences, right? To come home to themselves.
Right.
So all of this was already kind of unveiling itself within me, my breadcrumbs, if you were,
Yeah.
the direction I was meant to follow in life. And so, after my time at Butner, I had continued with that passion and focus and created a niche for myself specifically in this arena of what I like to call conscious leadership. What does it mean to be a conscious leader? How does one conduct themselves, but not from the concept of what other people think is right, and what other people expect of them, but really from this inner definition and dialogue of, what is integrous for me? Who am I? What did I come here for? Many of us don't stop to take a look at that, nor define it clearly for ourselves so that we're aligning it with our choice of actions, and then, obviously producing the outcomes that we get from that. So that's what I'm doing and why. And, like I said, I can really owe it all to that experience with you and the men.
Well, that is so amazing. I mean, I first of all, I just feel really, really honored that the experience you had with us um, kind of helped you take your next steps. And I know you're very successful at what you're doing. And it absolutely, we are needing a higher consciousness in the sort of CEO executive leadership level, and because we know it trickles down, and that's where it needs to start. So I'm really excited for you. I'm really excited for the business that you've built, and that you continue to expand. And so that's awesome. And I love that I could have been, that I was a piece of that and a part of that and a stepping stone to that. So thank you for that.
Yeah, it's nice, isn't it? It's like, oh, I get to see my little window in that person's house. It's like kind of, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
So let's talk a little bit today about the ingredients for personal transformation, at least seen through the lens of our experience working with these men in prison. Because I know that, I think at Whole Soul School and Foundation, we've done a lot of talking about, excuse me, different ways in which people describe personal transformation. So you have some of the big spiritual gurus out there who talk from different angles, and I think I definitely feel like we saw a pretty consistent unfoldment that had to do with a lot of different things in the men in prison, and perhaps maybe one of the biggest was one of the biggest ingredients that contributed to their ability to take a deep dive was the fact that they were incarcerated and that they had time. So being a captive audience gave them, I like to call it a universal pause. So they being incarcerated was sort of a universal pause.
Yeah.
They were in a place that they could not leave and did not have a whole lot to do. And so when they found themselves having an opportunity to take a class or a course or have an experience that was self-help oriented, several of them stepped up to do that. And we created a space for that. And I initially wasn't sure where that was going to go, but I knew that I had gone through some deeply personally transforming times and had learned a lot. And I knew that I wanted to share that with others. And it was a very natural thing to create this group. So, and I feel very lucky and blessed that I had the opportunity to do so. So I think for them, probably maybe one of the first ingredient for change for them, doesn't mean it has to be this way for everybody, but was the fact that they had time without the distractions of life. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because my previous career was as an elementary school French teacher, and so I get to watch people in their development of learning another language, and that the biggest thing, they've always said it, and they found it to be true in studies, is that when you are actually immersed and you're using the language all the time, that's when you learn it the quickest,
Yeah.
right? And when it's just 30 minutes a day 3 times a week, and then you leave the classroom and you're not using it, it's going to take longer, right? Different things need to be in place for you to learn the language adequately or appropriately when you don't have immersion, as opposed to when you do have immersion. So, I mean, I really believe, and in a lot of ways, these men were immersed
Yes.
in this, that they could obviously leave the room and still have each other to talk with and process what we talked about in the room. And so not having the distraction of anything else going on, having that kind of be on the front of the brain for them all the time while they're there, certainly wasn't, to me, it kind of reminds me of a type of immersion.
Yeah.
And I really do believe that's why we saw so much fast transformation in some regards. It may take other people who are not in that particular,
Yes.
soup
Yes.
a little bit longer. They also didn't have a lot of other close people in their lives, maybe that were pulling at that, questioning what they were learning.
Yes.
Um, I know some of the men said, once they got out or when they would interface with family members on the outside, that was when there became a bit of a challenge sometimes. Where it's like, you're changing, like you're talking differently, you're thinking differently, and just the differentness can be a little bit uncomfortable for a couple or family to handle. So they didn't have that on the day to day. They could just be within themselves, be within this frame, and really play around in that, immerse themselves in that for that period of time. So that is definitely one of the ingredients I've thought about, because people say, well, would it be the same on the outside? I'm like, no, it wouldn't be the same. It would be different because you've got a different environment. It can be done equally as impactfully. But yeah, this is definitely we're looking at a situation of immersion, I believe.
I think that I had never framed it that way, using that language, but that is exactly what it was. And I can also feel it in the contrast, because I've thought about how could I offer a similar program and group on the outside in the community, because in my mind, everybody could use not just support, but an experience in which they could immerse themselves to personally transform, shift themselves out of any kind of suffering, and gain, new skills in a new way in this world today. And I thought about how could that be recreated outside, and I think you're right. Of course, it can be done, but there are definitely different elements. People are living very busy lives, and they're not they don't have the luxury of thinking about it, about taking time to really immerse themselves in assignments in between groups.
You had these men like reading a book a week or something. I mean, what they were taking in massive doses is just really incredible. What they were willing to do that is really admirable.
And well, and what I love, what's so admirable, is that these men took advantage of it. There were many. Obviously, this was a small percentage of men over the 7 years we offered the group. It was a fairly small percentage of men compared to, because we only could take 12 to 15 per group. So it wasn't, the entire prison population by any means, but those who did step up into the journey, were really able to immerse themselves, and when they weren't sitting in the group room doing the processing and doing the deeper experiential work, they were able to talk with each other, they were able to read books, they were able to watch films, they were able to complete homework assignments with 100% focus. They didn't have kids running around and bills to worry about paying and all of those things. Um, so this is not to say that the level of personal transformation that many of them experienced can't happen for anyone else. It's just we're talking about their specific situation, and I think definitely that immersion experience was a key ingredient to the success of the program and the success of their own personal transformation, for sure.
What you should look at doing is like a series of weekend or week-long retreats where people sign up for a series over time, and it can be even over, if you decide to, in different locations, right? So it's taking people literally, like these men were, out of their element.
Yes.
Because when we're out of our element, it it kind of sets up, like we're trying to recalibrate, and what we recalibrate to is that 0 point of what's comfortable. So you take somebody out of their element and you create a comfort zone for them, they're going to calibrate to that comfort zone.
Yes.
And so that is a great way to kind of get people out of their heads, and into this new space that you want them to access. So we'll have to talk about that.
I think that's a 2020. I think that's definitely on the 2020 goal list. I would love to do that. Exactly. And I would love you to join me in that. So we will talk more. So when we're talking about the ingredients for transformation, and especially with these men in prison, I've thought about many other things. But another ingredient, and this really goes, I think, speaks to anybody, is the readiness and willingness to change. Where people have to be in a place with themselves where they've got some self-awareness that it's time to make some shifts, and how would you talk about getting in touch with that within the self?
That's a good question. I mean, I think typically it's been for many people over the centuries, it's been when a crisis happens, like you get a diagnosis of a major illness, or, a major accident, or something critical happens, the rock bottom concept, where people are like, wow, I have to change some things. And I believe as we've kind of started to evolve more into a different space, and this is really what I focus on with not only leaders but emerging leaders. You have some people who are challenging those upper echelons and on their way up there, but they have a whole different way of leadership in mind, right? And that this is about, it's more, and I'm finding the conversations are going more in this direction too, is a breakthrough of calling, where people are struck with that I'm being pulled over here, and this doesn't make any sense to me why I'm being pulled over here, but it just keeps tugging at me. It comes up everywhere, new people in my life striking up certain conversations, or even songs on the radio, or I mean, it's really interesting, and I've been hearing more and more about this. People are like getting curious about these seemingly divergent things that are happening in their lives that can't help but catch their attention.
Yeah.
And that gets me excited, because it means that we don't have to have crisis to get our attention anymore.
Yes.
It means people are getting to the place where they're not just acknowledging, they're not just noticing it, but they're actually asking questions.
Yes.
And saying, and they're making the connection within themselves to that external thing, and saying, there's something significant here, right? Those are the leaders that I'm having more conversations with, because they're like, whether it's something like, I just need to do this differently. I feel stuck as a leader, not because my business is failing, not because we're not making money, not because of anything, but I feel stuck. I don't feel like I'm connecting with my employees the way I want to. I don't feel like I'm connecting with my loved ones at home the way I want to. Our hearts are breaking open. I mean, in a good way. We're really opening those other, because we have 3 brains, right? We have the head brain, the heart brain, and the gut brain. And traditionally, the heart brain and the gut brain have been shut down, because traditionally, if we talk historically speaking, we've been in crisis. We've been in, I mean, it hasn't been until relatively recently that we even had time for self-help, right? Life was hard. Right. It was about getting up every day and getting through. So, and some people's lives are still like that. And so it's very difficult for them to pay attention to anything other than, this little operational system that is just getting them to slog through their day to day and keep them alive. Right. Right. But as we're given that ability, right, to live in a space that isn't just critical all the time, isn't just about surviving. Right. That we have that opportunity to step back and say, and this is another space that, because it comes into so much conditioning, how much conditioning have we had on be happy with what you have, be grateful for what you have. Don't get too big for your britches. I mean, I keep thinking of all these things that we've been so, down, 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 that we can buck up against that upper limit concept. Like we're being called to a higher place, but then it's like, oh, well, then I have to leave everyone else and don't want separation. Or, I've been taught that, oh, that's ego, to think that I can do bigger and better things. Or when I love what Ed Milet says about growth. And he said, and I can't remember exactly the language he uses, but it's something around being comfortably uncomfortable, where you're happy and grateful with what you have, but you're always looking for what's next. It's not I think we're so conditioned to the this or that. Either you're happy with what you have and you're not trying to push it and constantly say what's next, or you're doing what's next and that means that you're not happy with what you have. And
Right.
I just don't agree with that. I think we've been deeply conditioned in a completely improper fashion when it comes to that. Right. And so, knowing that that's a natural tendency, we all came here to be growth oriented beings. We all came here to grow. That's why children, when they come out of the womb, eventually grow. Like we're all supposed to continue to grow,
Right.
not just physically, but mentally, spiritually, emotionally, all these areas,
Right.
all these leads, you know, it it's necessary. And, comfort zone is really where people, that's becoming their critical point, is they're hitting a critical point of comfort zone where they're becoming so comfortable they're uncomfortable, but they're recognizing it.
Yes.
They're recognizing it, and that is what is super exciting for me. And that's like right, especially with those groups that are leaders, that's right in the niche that I like to kind of insert myself,
Yes. Yeah.
because that's the moment where if they have that support, that's the I want to say that's the place from which they can launch into their transformation.
So I could just call it, my word for that is, that's the catalytic point,
Yes,
right?
yes,
where
yes,
where it just anything is possible, and they
yes,
start to recognize that.
yes,
And so
yes.
I think beautifully languaged what you said is that there is a people are waking up to the synchronicities of life. People are paying more attention to the magic and what's that we're not just walking through this existence and just making it anymore. We're not just doing the next thing. It's just we are actually being, rather than being motivated by our conditioning and by things behind us. I like to say, rather than looking in the rearview mirror all the time as a motivation for behavior, we're actually there's actually like a future pull. We're actually looking through the windshield more, and we're saying, where do we want to go and how do I need to get there, and what do I need to do to help shift where I've come from, what I've learned, how do I now shift to move forward and change in however way I need to change. And people are waking up and becoming more willing to look at themselves, look at their patterning, and make the shifts needed to enhance their life, to maximize their potential. And of course, that's what we as coaches love to help people do.
Yeah,
um,
I love that concept, about looking forward.
yeah.
And because again, and this is the piece I think, I mean, I know I look at as a coach, listening linguistically, to people's language and where the truth is coming up through their language is the, what is their zone of genius and what's holding them back part. The holding them back is a lot of times what I find is people have these forward visions, but they're operating
Yes.
through looking, moving backwards. So it's like saying I want to go due north, and your behaviors and your belief systems are taking you due south, and that's such an important thing for people to understand. Like, why can't I get there? Why am I not, I mean, I have my goals, and I do my daily things. And what people don't realize is what you do is half the equation. If what you do isn't aligned with who you are and how you think and what you believe in, then you're going to be, spinning in circles. And I think that's where people get so frustrated. They think it's all about goals.
Right.
And I'm attending to my goals. Why am I not moving forward?
Right. Exactly. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. And we could go miles in all different kinds of directions in this
Yeah.
conversation. So, but it's very inspiring because I think both you and I just love being awake to the degree that I'm awake. I'm sure there's more of my consciousness that I can expand, but I just feel I get so jazzed up talking about these things and helping people, really identify what's keeping them from looking through that windshield and moving forward. And I think with the men, just to kind of circle back around, I think with the men that we worked with in prison, they were introduced to a lot of them were highly successful in their profession or in their family or in their culture or in their community or in their religious community or whatever it was as we define success. But here they are sitting in prison, having made some very poor decisions, questioning, how did I ever get here? How did I make the decisions I made? I don't understand. And then there we were to kind of crack them open and say, well, wait a minute, we got to look, we got to take you down a deeper path here, a deeper journey to discover some of those roots that led to some of those conditioned roots that led to the decisions and choices that they made. Not to sit in and dwell in those things, but to
Right.
identify them and to call them out, put them on the table, let them go, and then replace them with new thoughts, new beliefs, new skills. Um,
Well, I think that that's a key ingredient too, is that, what we created was an environment of it is what it is, and that it's neutral, right? A lot of these men were deeply, deeply troubled by what it looked like, right? Because most of the conversations our ego has is about looking right,
yep.
being right,
Image.
right? Looking good, being right, being safe, right? And being comfortable. So they had just been totally wiped out of that arena of looking good, being right, being safe, feeling safe, and being comfortable. And so the ego's flipping out, excuse me. And we come in, and where the ego flips out, a lot of times what we do is we go into protection mode, right? It's like, boom, boom, you can't get through. And when we create an atmosphere of, or an environment of, yeah, it is what it is, we're not looking at what you did. We're curious about what created that, because if that's not where you want to live, if that's not who you want to be, then what is? And approaching it that way, I think it just was almost to some of these men, because I remember watching, it's like just startling to them that they're not being judged, that
Right.
they're not, that we're not looking
I
at
think
them through those.
ingredient. I think that non-judgment is a key ingredient to
It's
transform.
absolutely key. And I think beyond just non-judgment, it's we were approaching their situation with curiosity,
Curiosity.
right? It's we're here, and it's not even to help, because I think a lot of men,
Right.
especially we being women and them being men, and us not living in the worlds that they had lived in, it's kind of like, you don't get it.
Yeah.
And we're just curious, right? We're really, and I believe that, what's the word, equalizing the playing field.
Mhm.
you know Coming in, I remember telling some of the men in that first talk that I did to the larger population, you know I could probably just as easily be here too. And I don't mean that literally, and that like I've broken federal laws. I mean that I have made major mistakes in my life, and if I were judged for every one of my mistakes, I would be in the same place,
Right.
right? So it's not about that. Like, we just basically took that piece right off the table from the get-go.
Right.
We're not looking at your story. I mean, I didn't even know their storyline, right? I wasn't privy as a volunteer to their profile, so I didn't know anything about them,
Right. Right.
right? There was no judgment to be had, even if I were one of those people. But we were there to operate under an entirely different platform, or on an entirely different platform.
Yeah.
And I think that for them, that first piece of, being seen, heard, and understood was, I mean, really, I think that is the main thing that we come here wanting as humans, is to be seen, heard, understood, and loved.
Yes.
So,
Yes. And so there we have like five ingredients right in there. That I wish everybody, not wish, I would like to see provided for everybody, especially people who are suffering and who want to change their life, right? And so that they can find a safe space, that they can find a space in which they are not judged, that they can engage their curiosity about themselves, right? And that they can start to awaken to all kinds of possibilities there, and to who they really are as these spiritual beings having a human experience, interacting with this world, with this big field of energy that we live in. And so we talked, in that group about all those things. And I think that intellectual curiosity and that safe space and that non-judgment and being a captive audience, all of those things were so important for their change. And I want to say that as I reflect on their journey, and as I reflect on the journey of my own, and as I reflect on the journey of the clients that I work with, I think a key ingredient is vulnerability.
Mm.
A key ingredient for change is vulnerability. It's the willingness to be vulnerable. And obviously people need those other ingredients probably in order to feel like they could be vulnerable, they can be vulnerable. But I tell you what, the pivot that I saw in these men's lives, in their personal lives, after a vulnerable moment, sometimes it was a moment, sometimes it was several moments strung together, but I saw just incredible pivots in their growth, catalyzed by these vulnerable moments. um
Yeah. You could have an amazing conversation about that with Brene Brown.
yeah, true, true. I really,
Because I mean, really,
we saw it in
that is that is the place of transformation, right? That's like you said, pivotal. That is kind of the or it's a catalytic point. We can't have. I mean, we can't have that transformational experience, and we can't experience it within ourselves unless we're being vulnerable. We just can't.
yeah.
There's no other way around it. People have tried. If I try to sneak around the back of the, it's not
And I think what's
it's
so
not transformational at that point.
right. And I just find it so remarkable that these men were able to get there in the environment they were in.
Yeah, that's what I like to tell people too. I'm like, if people can be vulnerable in prison, men with each other, like you can do this too. Trust me.
Exactly. Very, very powerful to witness. Very powerful to witness. And oftentimes what would happen through the vulnerable moment comes humility. Oftentimes this isn't a linear process, and we know that. And sometimes it takes a sense of humility to allow the vulnerability, and sometimes it takes vulnerability in order to get your way or find your way into a space of humility.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's a great quote. I love that because I think people don't oftentimes think of vulnerability and humility being in a relationship that way.
Hmm.
And really too, because I remember a lot of men, it's like vulnerable. Like they didn't even want to say the word. Like that's just stupid. Like I'm not going to be vulnerable, but and this is what we did a lot, right? This is what I was there to do a lot in the room is shift language. It's like, what about human? I mean, it tapping into your humanity is really what we're looking at here. You don't want to call it vulnerability, that's fine, but what about the importance? Can you conceptually sit there for a second with the concept of stepping into your humanity, what it is that makes you human in all aspects, not just the superficial physical things that we can see,
Right.
but all aspects of being human, and bringing that humanity forward. I love that. Yeah, I love
Well,
that.
and I would also say it's the same thing, but with a different word, and the word is authenticity. You know
Yeah.
that that it allowed some of these people, and many of us, have journeyed from living sort of a false life, with a false sense of power, or a false sense of ego, or a false identity even. And we don't realize it. We think it's real. We're conditioned to believe it's real. And it isn't until we're either called on the carpet, or we've got crisis, or a relationship, a marriage is at stake, or whatever it is, that we're called into questioning, wait a minute, who am I really? You know, what
And
is,
is this serving this experience I'm having on this planet? It's not serving the experience, right?
and so what I saw over and over again with these men is them saying, well, what do you mean I'm not, you don't think I, well, and in the night book, we use the book, the Knight in Rusty Armor, throughout the year. And in that book, it opens up with a knight who is sort of, his armor has rusted shut, and he cannot get over that he would have to live without armor, because the armor represents his bravery and his courage and his status in the kingdom, and his handsomeness, and all of these things, and he just thinks he is some kind of stud. And he can't imagine living without his armor, because how is he going to rescue these damsels in distress and slay the dragons and fight for the king? I can't do that without my armor. And this is his story that he tells himself, right?
Mhm.
You can imagine it. And so these men really took a journey. At first, it was all about questioning me and you, and what do you mean I'm gonna, what do you mean I'm not this blah blah blah? What do you mean I'm not this great, brave, amazing CEO, or financier, or drug kingpin? I mean, it didn't matter. There was always an identity there that they were so attached to, and it was so wonderful that they had the opportunity to kind of be bonked over the head to say, wait a minute, wait a minute. Th- You're let's talk about living a different kind of truth, and getting
Mhm.
them to really
Mhm.
question who they really are, and how they can
Mhm.
be who they are, so that they could let that go and find out who they want to become.
Yeah, and sometimes we have to be in these environments where what worked is not working, So they try to bring the charm, and they try to bring and it's just, it's like
Yeah.
that's not what we're talking about here. Sometimes we have to be in that to see that, oh, that key, we keep trying to jam it in the lock, but the lock's been changed.
Right.
It's just not going to work anymore. And so what we're left with is that true fit,
Right.
right? Which is who we are, right? Truth will always prevail, as they say, in that regard. And getting truthful, like to your point, getting truthful about who we are is sometimes it's just not a matter of, okay. Sometimes we don't even know, in many cases we don't know. It's not like we're kind of sitting back here behind the masks, like just waiting for the opportunity to put them down. It's like we have the mask because we actually think, like you said, we actually think we are the mask. We don't. And if we're being told we're not, that's incredibly scary.
Yeah.
I don't know what's back here. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know if that'll be accepted. I don't know if that's going to be acceptable. I don't know if I'm good enough without those things. And being able to see, where, because we've done a lot in our culture to condition men specifically to be like the islands, right? I remember seeing that, in middle school, because I taught kids up to 5th grade, and then they would go on to middle school, and they would oftentimes in that first 6th grade year come back and visit. And I'm like, God, what is going on? They're changing these kids over there. They go from, when they're young, and I was in an all boys school, so you could really see it, right?
Oh,
With
wow.
the males, is we pretty much raised them just like when I was in a co-ed, girls and boys didn't, if they were crying, we were giving them hugs or helping them up or whatever. And they go into middle school, and suddenly they're like being trained to be little men.
Yeah.
And we play games and sing songs, and then they're learning from textbooks, and everything's so, where, but that's what we do. We expect the male to be it all, know it all, deal with it all, pay the bills and go out there and make things happen and protect us, provide, protect, and serve. And they then believe, well, there's nobody I can turn to because I am the go-to, right? If I don't have answers, I can't turn to anybody because that's not acceptable. I'm supposed to be the answers,
Right.
right? And we wonder why people talk about the male ego, or the male leader that's in this ego. We place them there. I mean, we collectively as a culture,
Yes.
have conditioned the beliefs to be such an extent. So, in a lot of ways, we also get to take responsibility for allowing them to find themselves.
Yes.
And that's the thing I felt in that room is, just a overwhelming, it's like giving back type of thing. It's like, wow, we all made this happen. It wasn't just you and your decisions that got you here. It was all of us collectively. And
Yes.
we all collectively get to play a role in trying to create something different.
Absolutely. And how it's so beautifully said, because as a clinician in that setting, as a provider, as a coach in that setting, I had a deep sense of responsibility, but not because of my role, as a psychologist, but because I had gone through so much myself, and I had to transform and transcend so much at that time in my life. And what and it's never over. I'm continuing to do that, but I say that during that time I felt such a sense of responsibility to share and to help support other people tapping into their true self, tapping into what's really going on here, asking
Mhm.
them more about who they really are, and poking them in a way that that allowed for that curiosity and that deeper dive. And it was a sense of responsibility as a human being and as a member of society, as just a fellow human being walking the earth. It was a deep sense of responsibility, and I think if I were honest, I also felt that responsibility to them as men because of that cultural conditioning that you speak of.
That's exactly what my entire focus was when I woke up to it, when I finally started to put the pieces together
Wow.
through my experiences witnessing them. That became my driving force
Mhm.
is that, I want to dedicate the rest of my life to helping men see themselves as human first and men second, right? That not this whole thing of identification through what's expected of them as men in our society.
Right.
Like just, I mean, if I can dedicate my entire purpose to that, like I was on board. And so it's deeply personal to me
Yeah.
for that reason, because I would see it, like we saw it over and over and over and over again. And it became so plain to me
Yes.
what had been going on. And then I do think from that collective responsibility, we just treat each other differently. When we think about your life as being, I mean, I'm not responsible for the day to day in your life. You are, because that's part of your journey and that's part of how you learn and grow. But as a member here to hold space for you coming into your true, mission in life, what you came here for, your purpose, your your joys, your, the things that you want to do, be, and have, you know it's partially my responsibility to hold space to help that happen,
Yes.
you know um and so I just started to look at kind of what I do on this planet as another human being differently,
Yeah.
because of this experience. Like it bust open that wider vision.
Yes.
I mean, we're taught in various, at church or, wherever we go, that, we're a collective group and we're here for one another and all of that. But it's just, we talk about it in such limited, in such limited ways, in the church community or in the, family community or, but I mean, I got it. Like I saw it, and I think the men did too.
Mhm.
That's really what helped them transform was the group dynamic,
Yes.
because they didn't feel alone in this journey.
Yes. And that's, probably let's call that maybe our final ingredient for today, is what also helped, I think, um, enhance, or sort of, I don't want to say make it work, but enhance the process for all of them, was the group format, because they were mirrors for each other, right? Reflecting back the good and the bad and the ugly. And they grew from that. And I think that was, it's if I were coming up with literally an ingredient list to share with other people who either want to step into the experience of personal transformation at a deeper level, or a facilitator who wants to facilitate this process, I would, I would, I would really talk about an creating an immersive experience, a group experience, a safe, non-judgmental environment, right? Where, and I would encourage vulnerability, I would support vulnerability, and I would acknowledge the humility that grows out of the vulnerability, right? And I would really see myself as an ambassador to the authentic self, and,
Mhm.
for myself and also for those that we take on this journey.
Mhm.
The personal transformation can look very different for people, no matter what they've been through, no matter who they are, no matter what their conditioning, it can look different. But there are some ingredients, I think, that we've talked about today that are, I would say, pretty critical to
Yeah.
catalyzing the process. Not just catalyzing it, but what's the word, moving it forward, um,
Mhm.
to support the unfoldment, right?
Mhm.
The unfoldment and the
We
journey.
talk about creating the ideal environment, right? That fertile ground
Yes.
for something particular to grow. Like, certain seeds need particular types of environments to grow. And if we look at the seed of the self, is needing fertile ground to grow,
Yes.
it is about creating that environment that's fertile, for that growth to happen. And we're all just looking for that. I mean, it's like, is it here? It reminds me of what is it, the Dr. Seuss book, Are You My Mother?
Yeah.
It's like, is this my environment? Is
Right.
this my environment? And I think we just kind of like
Ground.
go through life, looking for our environments and just dealing with what we've got, thinking that, oh, well, okay, if this is the only soil, it's sucky soil, but it's the only soil I have.
Well, and it goes back, it speaks back to that comfort zone, it's
Mhm.
not, oh, it's not so bad. It's comfortable here. I
Right, right. Okay, so I'm gonna maybe be stunted in my growth, but at least I'm growing. Like it's so funny what we get okay with.
Yes.
And I tell people it is your birthright to be in fertile ground. Don't settle. Settling is like, I mean, we got this amazing thing called life. It's like winning the lottery. What did they say? Like you have a better chance of winning the lottery like 1,000 times, or even probably more than that than you do of being able to come into the form that you were gifted. Like this is like the greatest lottery ticket we could ever have, and we want to just settle. I'm like, really? Like, come on,
Right.
So
It's so amazing. And this is also bringing it back to the initial part of the conversation is people are starting to actually be uncomfortable with settling. And I
they're
love,
not settling.
no.
Oh, we are really getting uncomfortable with the concept of mediocrity. And I could not, I mean, I feel like the hallelujah chorus. Like, I mean,
Right.
like I cannot see enough of that start to emerge because that has been one of my biggest pet peeves, if you can say,
Yeah.
is just this, mediocrity. I'm like, oh my God, you're selling your, you know, all your gifts down the river. So yeah, so I mean, it is, I think these people are going to be coming looking for this kind of experience more and more because of what we're talking about.
Yes.
It's like, okay, I'm getting the signals and I'm being pulled, but I need some fertile soil to grow in this
Yeah.
next iteration of what my life is that I'm waking up to. So I think this is so important for people to get curious about how to create these environments. And it's not just about those of us who are facilitators for programs. Individually, we can do this in our homes, in our own communities, in our own businesses, in whatever environments we're in, to be curious, to ask those questions first for ourselves. I mean, because I think a lot of people rush out with these ideas and they want to change the world.
Yeah.
I'm like, you know how you change the world? Start with your own little world. That's how you change the world. You don't have to be this person, oh, I see it all, so let me go fix everyone. That's not what we did either. We didn't stand in there as fixers. We stood in there as we were bearing witness. And that's why it was transformational for the two of us as well.
Yeah, and we were tending the soil, we were tending the soil. We were just soil tenders.
So we're gardeners.
So I would just, I want to thank you so much, Tracy, for being here today to talk about it. This is the final Transformation Talks episode for the year 2019. And it seems very fitting that it ends with you this year. I'm just so pleased and blessed that you join me today, and will hopefully continue to join me in all kinds of venues. We will collaborate in a lot of ways, I hope. So I just want to thank our listeners and our viewers for supporting Whole Soul School and Foundation. You can find us at wholesoulschoolandfoundation.org. We are on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And we are looking forward to moving into the energies of 2020. We have all kinds of ideas to move, through our windshield, and are formulating those ideas and getting things ready to kick off 2020 in January with some new guests, some new formats, and some new ideas. So thank you everybody who has participated in Whole Soul School and Foundation this year. There's still time to donate at wholesoulschoolandfoundation.org. And I wish from the bottom of my heart, Traci, you and your family, an amazing transition into the new year and a wonderful 2020. And I wish the same for all of our listeners and viewers. So thank you so much. And have a wonderful holiday.
Happy holidays.
Thank you.